Good day, students. I welcome us all to another segment of this class. I hope we are all having a nice time, and I hope we are still keeping safe. I miss you guys. Kurufi, how Bayero, Salim Zakari, Amina Zainawa. I miss you guys. I miss everybody. I hope very soon we'll be together. Thank you. Our topic for today is indirect rule. Indirect rule in West Africa. Now, I'm going to take us to the next slide so that we'll go through the objectives. We'll go through what we intend to achieve by the end of this lesson. Hold on. Yes, objectives. My objective status. By the end of this lesson, students should be able to what? 1. Define indirect rule. 2. List essential features of indirect rule. 3. Reasons for the introduction of indirect rule. 4. Roles of traditional rulers in the indirect rule system. All these are all what we intend to achieve by the time we are done with this class. I'm going to take you over to the next slide now. First and foremost, what is indirect rule? Indirect rule may be defined as a British system of ruling her colonies with the use of local chiefs and traditional laws and customs, with British officials merely supervising the administration. We said it's a system whereby the British rule over our, when we say colonies, these are the areas that they've been able to put under their care, under their custody. Those are the areas that they've been able to colonize and marginalize. Now, when traditional rulers are used to talk to their people, to announce the rules made by the colonial masters, to carry out their policies, we say indirect rule is taking place. But it doesn't end there. The traditional chiefs were not just left alone to do their thing by themselves. They were being supervised by the British officials that came from Britain. Indirect rule was introduced in Nigeria by Lord Lugard as a child of necessity. They just noticed that if they did not include traditional rulers in this process of administration, it's going to be very, very tedious for them alone to carry out. Because first and foremost, they don't understand the terrain. They don't understand the language, they don't understand the tradition, they don't understand the custom. So they need somebody, or they need a group of people that will help them carry out all these tasks. And Lord Lugard is called the father of indirect rule in West Africa because he is the brain behind the introduction of this system of administration where traditional rulers will be used. Traditional rulers will be the go-between or the middlemen between the British government and the traditional people. I hope we are following. Go back to the next. I'm taking you to the next slide now. What are the features of indirect rule? When indirect rule system was taking place, what was those things that were happening? What were they doing? Number 1, this system used the existing traditional system of administration. Let me take the North for example. In the Hausa Fulani pre-colonial era in Nigeria, before the coming of traditional colonial masters, they already had a system working for them. They had an emir. The emir was able to serve as the executive head of affairs as executive head of what was happening. The emir had police, they had treasurer, they have the Serikin Ruwa, they have the Serikin Power, they have the Serikin Pada, they have the prime minister, they have a structure working for them. So when the colonial masters came, they did not abolish this system. What they did is that they key on those systems and continue from where the traditional rulers stopped. 2, traditional laws and customs we are using in administration. Like I said, we already had our traditions and laws. We had our courts. When you go to when you take a journey back time to the Igbo pre-colonial era, they have their council of elders that see to issues. They have their village youth that safeguard what is happening. They safeguard the people. They protect them. They protect their territory. So all these were laws already put in place to provide protection and see to execution of projects. The indirect system was supervised by the British officials. They didn't just allow the chiefs to carry out everything all alone. The aspect of supervision was done by the British officials. It's just like you are in school and you have prefects. What the prefect do is to monitor you, watch what you do, and at the end report to teachers or to authority in place. It was not an expensive system of administration. Those traditional rulers were not actually paid. They were paid in peanuts, money that were not much. So it was it is the cheapest system of administration so far. Taxes were collected and native police system was introduced. Yes, a method of collecting tax from your yields, as in at the end of your harvest period, your yield, you pay tax on it. If you have cows, if you have animal husbandry, you pay tax. If you have slaves, you pay tax. So all this little money collected were used to run the system. I hope we are following. Yes. Take you to the next slide. Reasons for the introduction of indirect rule system in West Africa. Why was it introduced? Number one, lack of adequate British personnel. The British personnel that were on ground were not adequate, were not enough to see to the smooth running of these colonies. So they have to look inward for other people that can augment. That's why they were using traditional rulers in that regard. Another one, inadequate funds forced Lord Lugard to introduce this system. Back home in Britain, the crown were not willing to release enough cash to the colonial masters. They are not willing to release enough funds, enough finance to enable them carry out their project. So in order for them to be able to collect tax, charge people on things that yield money, they have to introduce this kind of system of indirect rule so that the chiefs, the traditional rulers, will be able to talk to their people to be able to garner these resources. Number three, to preserve traditions and customs of black people. That's why we have museums till today. When you go to museums, you see things of old, what our forefathers made use of, their tools, their clothes, the kind of animals they rode on, their means of transportation and all that. So to be able to preserve these traditions, they don't want the tradition of the black man to just go missing like that. So they now made the traditional rulers custodians of this tradition, protectors of this tradition, people that will be able to preserve these traditions for generations to come. Next, the British had no adequate knowledge of the areas they were colonizing. Yes, they don't know the terrain, they don't know the weather, they don't know the different diseases that are ravaging the place, they don't know the kind of animals, dangerous animals they will come across. So they have to make use of indigenous people that understand the terrain and know the nooks and crannies of all the area they were colonizing. The indirect system was very cheap system of administration, like I said. It's the cheapest so far because a lot of resources will not go into it. They were paid that they were more or less not even paid the traditional rulers that they were using to carry out the project. Next slide. I hope we are following. What are the roles of traditional rulers in indirect rule system? Number one, collection of taxes. Like I said, they acted as the middlemen between the colonial masters and the indigenous people. Number two, they serve as the link between the local people and the colonial governments. The link, the bridge, the middlemen between the local people in one hand and the colonial government in the other hand. They serve as president of local courts. They serve as because these people, whenever a proceeding is taking place, they speak in local dialect that the white men don't understand. So they made these traditional rulers president of this local court to preside over issues and forward the outcome of such issues to the colonial masters. They maintain law and order by establishing police force. Like I said, before the coming of the colonial masters in Hausa Fulani pre-colonial era, they already had their dogere, they have their policemen that were up and doing and going about maintaining law and order. They assisted the colonial government to carry out their policies and programs, like the policies of establishing schools, like the policies of establishing markets, like the policies of establishing dispensaries to treat the sick people. All these, they were able to achieve all these with the support and assistance rendered to them by the traditional chiefs. Now, I'm going to take you over to the next slide. Our assignment is very, very necessary. It's very, very important. This is the only way I get to understand if you actually followed all what I have in this slide. So this assignment, just like the first one I gave you, should be done, and